Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Ewart. It's Thursday, February 17th. This is Africa 54.
Could France's proposed withdrawal from Mali embolden jihadists? We'll have details. Russia rebuilding ties with the continent raises concerns in the West about tactics and goals. And the short shelf life of AstraZeneca slows the COVID vaccine rollout to the world's poorest nations.
We begin with the European Union Africa Summit in Brussels Thursday and the major development that France and its allies are deciding to pull their troops out of Mali after almost a decade based there fighting Islamist insurgents across West Africa. Diplomats fear the exit of 2,400 French troops from Mali could increase violence and destabilize its neighbors. Coming up, you'll hear from French President Emmanuel Macron on his decision to pull out his forces, and we'll hear what Malians think about today's announcement. We'll also discuss Macron's decision with a Malian political analyst. But first, Henry Ridgewell tells us about other topics discussed at Thursday's summit. French President Emmanuel Macron insists that troop pullout does not constitute a failure of its 9-year mission. Macron says the withdrawal from Mali will take 4 to 6 months, during which time there would be fewer operations against Islamist militants in the Sahel. France has had troops in Mali since 2013 when it intervened to drive back Islamist militants advancing on the capital. Here are more details on the troop pullback from the French president.
Je récuse complètement ce terme.
Okay. Well, we're having a little trouble with that, so we're going to move on and go to Houston, Texas, where one of our political analysts is standing by. So for more insight on what the French president announced about the withdrawal from Mali, I'm now joined live via Skype from Houston, Texas by Aristide Sidibe, a Malian political analyst. Aristide, it's great to have you back on Africa 54. French President Emmanuel Macron was saying the withdrawal of French troops does not constitute a failure on its 9-year mission. What is your reaction?
First of all, thank you, Esther, for having me today. Yes, the president of France is stating that the 9-year mission is not a failure, but for Malian on the ground is a total failure. Because if you look at all the metrics of what France aimed to do in Mali, which is to put terrorists out of Mali, today 80% of the country is controlled by those terrorist groups, and there are thousands of civilians who die over those 9 periods. So Macron is going to a re-election period in France. Of course, he's going to say that the mission was a success, but for Malian, and if you look at any objective metric, this mission was a total failure.
I am sure you've been following this summit going on in, European and the African allies are also there. But also, there was a statement that there's going to be a lack of support from Africans, European allies, and as well as, coupled with the sanctions that ECOWAS imposed on Mali the other day. What do you think this means for the military junta moving forward?
Yes, so this is a great question because I will kind of rephrase that question in the sense that what does it mean for the Malian people? Mali is one of the poorest countries in the world, and millions of Malians live with less than $1 a day. That itself is a sanction. That itself is an embargo. But those people live every day with dignity and honor. So. And if you look at the economy of Mali today with the sanction, almost half of the economy is basically an informal sector. I'm not saying they're not feeling the sanction, but the doom scenario that everybody's talking about is not what is happening in Mali. I traveled extensively in Mali. I have family there. I was born and raised there. So the doom scenario is not something that will happen because Malians are very resilient people.
You see, some analysts are also saying that the withdrawal of French troops in Mali is a boon to jihadists, especially in that whole Sahel region and your native country of Mali. How do you react to that?
I mean, when I hear those stories and I call them talking head, they get paid to say those, to be honest with you. Which also, if you look at the flip side of that statement, it means that to your first question, the mission was a total failure because if they're saying that jihadists will take over, it means that the mission did not succeed. So you can't have both ways.
I'm looking at a statement, a reaction from the Malian Armed Forces spokesman, Souleymane Dembele. He said there hasn't been any military solution because terrorism has engulfed the entire territory of Mali. What do you make of that statement?
It is a very interesting statement, Esther. I've been saying for years that the Malian army has been quarantined on its own territory by the Alger Peace Accord. Remember, we have the French Barkhane, we have Takuba, we have the G5 Sahel, we have MINUSMA. All those forces in Mali for 10 years were operating on the Malian territory, but with the fact that Malian military did not have the freedom of movement. So what he's saying is that there was no true military solution to this until now that the Malian army is trying to recover those territory loss.
But separating everyone else from this, the fact that African allies are saying they do not support the military junta, what does this mean for the Malian people? You're talking about the Malian people. Those are the people who need to put food on the table. They're the people who need to sleep with peace without having to worry about Islamist jihadists and other terrorists around the country. What do you make of that? Does this mean Mali is going to be isolated in the region and in Africa for that matter?
Mali is not going to be isolated. There are 6 million Malians living abroad. We are one of the most vibrant diaspora. We will help our family. We will help our family. Mali is not going to be isolated. There are a country like Guinea who are giving access to the poor. We are a country like Mauritania who are. Algeria as well. Mali is not going to be isolated. Those who are saying that are hoping that Mali will fail. Mali will not fail.
How has ECOWAS sanctions impacted the country so far?
It has slowed down the economy. Like I stated, there is no, the country is suffering from it. But like I said, Malian, this is a very poor country. And if you ask Malian on the ground, they're going to say to you, we've been living on embargo for years because of this situation. So today, having ECOWAS imposing those sanctions to us is meaningless to us because our women, our kids are dying. We want solution to that. To us, that's the most important thing.
Why would you say it's meaningless? We've spoken to a number of Malians. We actually do have Malians working here in VOA. And what we hear back in Mali is that because of the sanctions, they are not able to travel to the countries in the neighborhood as they used to do. They cannot do business with them. So those restrictions are biting the economy. They are hitting hard on Malians. What do you say to that?
I travel, and I'm on my way to Mali in the next couple of weeks. So if you recall, the French airline company stopped a flight to Bamako. But as of a couple of days ago, they did announce they're coming back to Mali because Malians are the second diaspora in France. So money talk. Mali is the third economy in the XOF zone. So the sanctions are cutting both ways. The port of Dakar today is basically no longer working because Mali has 70% of its export going through that port. So I'm not saying that people are not suffering, but Malians have decided to make sure they take back their country, and they want to make sure that what they want to do for their country will be what the current leader will be doing.
Now, the Malian junta had said they would hold elections much earlier than, somewhere in February. I don't remember whether it's next year, but they have now pushed it way far to 2025. What do you make of that? Why wait until then to have democratic elections take place in the country?
So my take on that was, if you recall, Esther, there was what they call a national dialogue that call upon Malians to give their opinion on the duration of the transition. So the final document was at the minimum of 6 months and a maximum of 5 years. And that document was submitted to the head of state, the ECOWAS ever said. But the document was leaked, and the narrative that came out was that the junta asked for 5 years. So, I mean, to me, it is not accurate to say that they asked for 5 years. They gave a time frame based on people's opinion. Nevertheless, this is just stemming from the same ECOWAS that I imposed 18 months for at the beginning of this transition. I remember coming on one of the shows on VOA that it was a big mistake. And today, everybody's looking at that mistake right now because the time that was allocated for the transition was not enough. And today is not a question of if the transition will be extended. It will be a question about how much.
Well, how much? But they said until 2025. That's a long time. Who knows what's going to happen between now and then? Now, you say you keep in touch with your folks back home. What are their biggest concerns right now?
The biggest concern is security, safety. That's what they talk about all the time. I have my own family member who've been affected by this. So what they want today is to be able to go to school. We have kids in Mali who have not been in school for almost 10 years. They want security. That's the main concern today.
And how has the COVID-19 impacted the country?
One of the things that is amazing about not just Mali, that's the whole continent, because like I said, I travel extensively there, is that COVID, for lack of a better word, they basically said that that's for the elite. It's not a lot of people are very dismissive of COVID, but it does not prevent people from surviving because it's, like I said, this is one of the poorest countries in the world, and people are resilient, and they have to put food on the table, and they will soldier on every day.
You know, speaking from the heart and speaking to people back in Mali, political analysts as well as, just common, citizens, what do they see as the strategy for the military junta to move the country forward. Do they have confidence in the junta?
There was a survey done by a well-respected statistician where 80% of the Malians supporting the military in power. And that speaks a volume of the popular support of the transitional government. They see as the France or the West imposing their will on the Malian people. This is something that Malians are very resentful of. And I remember coming on your show a few months ago, and I did say that the level of resentment is bubbling. And at the time, very few people notice it, because people want solution, and they are holding their current leader accountable. That is something that people in the West do not anticipate.
Right. Thank you so much, Aristide. We had you for more than we expected. We are having a little technical issues here, but thank you so much for your perspective. Aristide Sidibe is a Malian political analyst. He joined us live via Skype from Houston, Texas. Moving on, Moderna has applied for patents in South Africa relating to its COVID-19 vaccine, prompting fears the company could eventually seek to prevent a new African vaccine manufacturing hub from making its own version of the mRNA shot. Moderna spokesperson Colleen Hersey confirmed it had filed for patents related to both the COVID-19 vaccine and Moderna's platform technology in South Africa and elsewhere, after a group of 60 Africa-based charities raised concerns. Moderna says the move will not block vaccine distribution in Africa, but charities fear Moderna will enforce the patents when COVID-19 is declared endemic. The relatively short shelf life of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine is complicating the rollout to the world's poorest nations, according to officials and internal World Health Organization documents reviewed by Reuters. As vaccine production has ramped up and wealthier nations began donating excess doses, some countries, particularly in Africa, are now struggling to administer the big shipments. Clara Frank explains.
It's the latest headache to plague the COVAX vaccine sharing program, co-led by the WHO and aimed at getting shots to the world's neediest people. According to COVAX data and officials, the problem with the short shelf life largely concerns AstraZeneca, COVAX's second biggest supplier after Pfizer. Many vaccines are arriving with only a few months and sometimes weeks before their use-by date. Some countries have had to destroy expired doses, including Nigeria, which dumped up to 1 million AstraZeneca vaccines in November. 2.5 months of shelf life is the minimum duration African countries reckon they need to administer the shots. But AstraZeneca said since the start of the global rollout, more than 250 million of its shots left factories with less than 2.5 months before expiring. Gavi, the nonprofit that runs COVAX alongside the WHO, said about 30 million AstraZeneca shots were rejected or deferred last year by poor nations. That amounts to a quarter of AstraZeneca donated shots via COVAX. Many were later reassigned to other countries, Gavi added, noting that more than 95% of them were AstraZeneca. It did not say where to. Other than short shelf life, COVAX's complex system to assign doses to countries, donor requests to deliver them to selected nations, and quality checks often eat into the vaccine's short life. Millions of Moderna and Pfizer vaccines could also go wasted, some African countries warned in the WHO document. The problem has been often linked to low vaccine uptake and insufficient cold chain equipment to distribute these shots in remote regions. Gavi said it has encouraged AstraZeneca to apply to the WHO for an extension of the expiration date. But talks have not led yet to a formal application. Clara Frank, Washington.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come. Amid a doping controversy, Russian teenager Kamila Valieva stumbles into 4th place in figure skating in Beijing. We'll be right back. Russia has garnered the world's attention with its aggressive stance toward Ukraine. The former Soviet power has been quietly rebuilding its ties with Africa, strengthening economic and military cooperation, but also raising Western concerns about its tactics and goals there. VOA's Carol Gansberg reports.
Russian flags waved in Burkina Faso's capital following January's military coup in the West African nation. A statue unveiled in the Central African Republic last fall shows local soldiers backed by Russian fighters, protecting civilians. Those are the more obvious symbols of Russia's resurgent presence on the continent. Africa is a foreign policy priority, Russian President Vladimir Putin said at the first Russia-Africa summit of political and business leaders in 2019.
It was agreed at the summit to create a new mechanism for dialogue in the form of a Russia-Africa partnership.
A second summit is planned for St. Petersburg in October. The first, at the Black Sea resort town of Sochi, generated diplomatic agreements and billions of dollars worth of deals for arms, agriculture, energy, and more, said organizer Ross Congress Foundation. Moscow has been building new ties and refreshing alliances forged during the Cold War, when the former Soviet Union supported socialist movements across Africa. After the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991, it largely withdrew from the continent. Russia's overtures in recent years offer cooperation without the political or other conditions imposed by Western countries, Putin has said.
Russia provides, as did the Soviet Union before, an alternative vision for African nations. If there is one common feature between what the Russians are doing now and what the Soviets used to do, it's this common anti-Western critique.
The spread of militant Islamist extremism and other violence in Africa has created more openings for Russia's military. In Mali, so has the planned drawdown of troops by France, Mali's former colonial ruler and partner in the fight against jihadists for nearly a decade. Private military contractors also are helping advance Moscow's agendas in Africa, Western observers say. These include fighters in the shadowy Wagner group, allegedly controlled by Putin associate Yevgeny Prigozhin. Putin has denied any connection with the group.
It is not the state. It is private business with private interests tied to extracting energy resources, including various resources like gold or precious stones.
The United Nations is investigating reports of grave human rights abuses in the Central African Republic, allegedly committed by private military personnel. Meanwhile, Russian mercenaries are glorified as public protectors amid a coup attempt in the 2021 Russian film, The Tourist. The movie, set in the Central African Republic, reportedly was funded by Putin ally Prigozhin. In Mali, the leaders of a 2020 military coup have brought in Russian military trainers and what U.S. and French authorities say are Wagner mercenaries. Some in Mali welcomed them by waving Russian flags, reflecting not only the country's historic ties with the former USSR, but also public impatience over continued insecurity, says Niagale Bagayoko, a Paris-based political scientist who chairs the African Security Network. The NGO seeks security and justice reforms.
In 2013, the Malian population were enthusiastic when the French arrived in the countries. And you can see today that they are rejecting their presence. To be honest, I would not be very surprised if in 2 years or so. The same could happen with the Russian presence, in fact.
Russia isn't the only foreign government trying to broaden influence in Africa, home to vast resources, including a surging youth population. The White House plans a second U.S.-Africa summit later this year, and the European Union has announced a new $172 million investment in the infrastructure countering China's Belt and Road Initiative. China is Africa's biggest economic partner. Carol Gunsberg, VOA News, Washington.
Russian teenager Kamila Valieva shocked the figure skating world by stumbling into fourth place in the women's singles event on Thursday in the wake of her doping controversy, ensuring the medal ceremony at the Beijing Olympics will go ahead. Valieva finished with a total score of 224.09, her hand masking her face after one last forced smile to the judges as she skated head down towards the exit. Valieva landed the opening quad but faltered after her triple axel, the first of a number of uncharacteristic stumbles in the free skate routine. Her compatriot Anna Shabakova claimed the gold with a total score of 255.95. Meanwhile, few Africans are competing in this year's Beijing Olympics. Well, I'll move on to elite Nigerian monobob and skeleton competitor Simidele Adeagbo has lodged a formal complaint with the International Bobsleigh and Skeleton Federation, alleging gender discrimination in the spots allocated to men and women at the Beijing Games. Louisa Knox reports.
Nigerian monobob and skeleton competitor Simidele Adeagbo is used to tackling challenges head-on. Now she is taking on another, alleging gender discrimination within the Beijing Olympics. Adeagbo has launched a formal complaint with the International Bobsleigh and Skeleton Federation, known as IBSF, claiming gender discrimination in the number of spots allocated to men and women at the Games. In a letter to the IBSF obtained by Reuters, lawyers for the 2018 Pyeongchang Olympian said she was excluded from the 2022 Olympic monobob event by a single spot. The letter stated there is an insidious and willful gender disparity in the number of sled spots made available for men and women.
It's really highly frustrating. I have made so much progress, just seeing how I've grown and developed in the sport, and I wanted to be right there competing with the best in the world. And so it's really frustrating to have that cut short, not because of anything that I did or any, lack of talent or skill, but simply because the rules in place are unlawful and discriminatory.
The monobob was introduced to the Olympic program for the Beijing Games with the intention of bolstering the number of women who can compete in the bobsleigh events. Men are allocated 28 spots in the four-man bobsleigh event and 30 spots in the two-man. Women, meanwhile, are allocated 20 spots in the monobob and 20 in the two-person bobsleigh. Adeagbo, who is the first African athlete to have won an international bobsleigh event, believes she would be at the Games now if the rules were different.
There's enough high-caliber athletes. I mean, there were enough that were on this list to fill the spots that were available, but instead, women are being left at home.
The IBSF did not